Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are getting into a studio video overview, a real deep dive, detailed long episode into some wild, current YTD, that's year-to-date, headline news trends. Because right now, the most volatile flashpoint in US-Canada trade, well, you might think it's steel, or autos, or maybe critical minerals. But actually, scratch that, it's garbage. We're talking about municipal solid waste, or MSW, disposal shipped across the border to U.S.-Michigan landfills from Ontario, Canada. And today, we're going to see how a cutting-edge concept, known as the sentient bridge, is stepping in to solve a massive geopolitical headache. Here's a quick look at our roadmap for today. We're going to move from the messy geopolitical disputes at the border right into a cutting-edge technological resolution. All right, let's jump right into Section 1. The Geopolitics of Garbage, looking at this cross-border crisis. To really grasp the sheer scale of the Ontario-Michigan waste corridor, you just need to look at this number, 3.46 million. That is the exact number of tons of everyday trash, municipal solid waste, that Michigan imports from Ontario annually. For decades, this transboundary movement was just a routine logistical operation. But Ontario simply doesn't have the domestic capacity to handle its own waste right now, making it incredibly dependent on its American neighbor. And this illustrates perfectly why this corridor matters so much. Canadian imports make up 14.35% of all waste disposed of in Michigan landfills. It's a massive dependency. Michigan relies on the business but faces intense local pushback over being a so-called dumping ground, while Ontario literally relies on this export valve to keep its own cities from overflowing. So, moving on to Section 2, trade wars and tariffs, the economic shock. The old dump-and-forget economic model we've relied on, it's actively collapsing right in front of us. Historically, Michigan practically gave away landfill space at an incredibly low 36 cents per ton. But now, Michigan's proposed Senate Bill 246 aims to hike that tipping fee up to a staggering $5 per ton. That massive increase would completely erase the cost advantage of cross-border shipping, essentially overnight. And then you add sweeping federal trade threats into the mix, with reporting keywords like Trump and Washington dominating the news cycle regarding border security. Market realities are shifting dramatically. As Ontario Premier Doug Ford stated recently regarding the proposed U.S. tariffs, the moves are, quote, unjustified, unfair, and frankly, illegal. Between state-level fee hikes and federal trade barriers, the border is thickening very quickly for Canadian waste exports. Which brings us to Section 3, the looming landfill crunch, a capacity crisis. What actually happens when the geopolitical music stops and the border closes to thousands of garbage trucks? Look at this data. Ontario generates nearly 17 million tons of waste annually. If they cannot export those 3.44 million tons to the U.S., Ontario is facing a hard, undeniable deadline. They will completely run out of internal landfill space by the year 2034. That is less than 10 years away, folks, to replace massive critical infrastructure. And here is what a huge volume of that problem actually looks like on the ground. Chaotic construction, renovation, and demolition waste. Crucially, up to 40% of this specific stream is wood. Ontario cannot just bury this anymore. They desperately need to transform this unmerchantable wood into valuable resources, like biocarbon, just to survive this crunch. Okay, Section 4, the 2026 USMCA review, the ticking clock. This waste crisis isn't happening in a vacuum. It is tied directly to the broader trilateral trade agreements governing North America. Everything is escalating towards July 1, 2026. That is the date of the mandatory joint review of the USMCA, or CUSMA as it's called in Canada. The U.S. Trade Representative has heavily signaled a desire for stricter rules of origin and traceability across absolutely all sectors. The days of undocumented, chaotic cross-border material flows, they're ending. So how do we fix it? Section 5, building the sentient bridge, the tech pivot. Faced with soaring costs and closing landfills, Ontario has to pivot to localized processing, transforming waste into a circular bioeconomy. But here's the catch. You can't manage what you can't measure, right? To survive strict ESG reporting and aggressive border audits, simply recycling just isn't enough anymore. You need perfect, verifiable data, proving exactly where material came from and what it's becoming. And this brings us to a really fascinating solution highlighted in our sources, the 905 Wood Digital Refinery. This platform acts as a sentient bridge. It's essentially a verifiable digital architecture, connecting that chaotic, dusty, physical construction waste we just looked at to the high purity requirements of the biocarbon market. Let's break down the 905 wood digital refinery workflow because it's incredibly precise. It starts right out in the field with a request for quote. It checks the material's certificate of origin, executes rigorous verification and compliance checks, and then instantly generates a secure document. In technical terms, it produces a digital refinery application workflow UI/UX output PDF documentation feature. It basically gives regulators and border agents exactly what they demand with zero headache.
Which takes us to our final section, Section 6, Securing the Bioeconomy, Operationalizing AI.
So how do you actually execute this complex digital compliance out in a dusty, chaotic scrapyard? I mean, you can't just drag a desktop computer into a pile of demolition wood for sure. The answer is operationalizing edge AI directly in the field. Field workers are using a Google Pixel 10 Pro with Android 16 using LightRT AI stack features. This gives them the on-device AI power to analyze visuals and verify materials instantly, without even needing a constant cloud connection. It is a real game changer. By mitigating the massive risks of border audits and ensuring perfect compliance, the 905 Wood Digital Refinery secures Ontario's industrial leadership in the global circular bioeconomy. They are literally taking a severe geopolitical vulnerability, this huge dependence on Michigan's landfills, and turning it into an advanced, data-driven manufacturing advantage. It leaves us with a truly fascinating question to ponder. If a smartphone running edge AI can resolve a billion-dollar geopolitical garbage dispute by ensuring perfect compliance, how else is AI going to rewrite the rules of international trade? The sentient bridge might just be the very beginning of a whole new era. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. It's been a blast. See you next time.